This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're on the air with Elroy Waters. And we're going to talk about the concepts of like roles of your role as an AI strategist, author, and family. Going to go into the AI aspects of information technology, but welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Glad to be here.
So, like, what made you want to get into this area? Just kind of giving you maybe a backstory before we
Yeah,
get
sure.
into the depth of it.
Let's see. So I was in tech sales at the time. Everybody, well, not everybody, but people who've studied AI for a little bit, they'll know AI's been around since the 50s. But people like you and me, we were thrown into it, winter of 2022 when this interesting thing called ChatGPT was released into the world. And as a software engineer, you're going to know this. Moving into my first few interactions with ChatGPT, I already had the knowledge that technology advances exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and for people in the audience who don't know what that means, that basically is saying that the amount of time it took to get from the horse-drawn carriage to the car was a really long time.
Yeah.
But the amount of time it took to get from car to airplane was much shorter. And then from airplane to rocket ship, even shorter still. And so I say all that to say, when I did my first few prompts with ChatGPT back in November or December of 2022, it was just the realization that this technology is going to radically evolve and therefore change the world. It's going to be a virtually unrecognizable world that my daughter would inherit. Mm-hmm. And so I felt then and still feel and try to impress upon others this sense of responsibility to learn at least something about the technology because it will impact the lives of our children. And everybody that we know and love is going to be impacted by this technology. And so that's why I got into it. And I've been studying it every day ever since, self-directed largely. But yeah, that's what got me into it. And honestly, that's what keeps me in it.
Yeah, I mean, as a software guy, and I'm in the finance area working with a startup, but I've been in tech since I'm 57. I've been doing tech since like 93.
Yeah.
Started on COBOL mainframes. Now we're into blockchain, AI, cloud computing. It's all a mixture. And I still deal with vSAM DB2s and then, Java front ends, cloud computing, AWS with a little AI thrown in. So we're all over the map because we're dealing with big enterprises that are still on big mainframes, and then
of course,
people for data analytics and cloud. The AI is really important. But one of the concerns I have, well, I'll start off as an artist. Mm-hmm. Like if you think about, I'll go back, and since you're a bass player, you fully understand.
Yeah.
Like when sampling came, the technology kind of outstripped the law.
Yeah.
We had a band like a De La Soul.
Yes.
They used the sample, right? And then they found out, we didn't clear these.
Mm-hmm.
So they had albums that could not be digitally released for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Because they never fully cleared the sample. Now my daughter is a graphic artist, and I kind of see the same kind of issue with art.
Of course.
Where digital management has never really been something that graphic artists have dealt with.
Yeah.
At a degree other than like the people like Disney. And companies that own IP, like they own like Shrek, you own that. If somebody sees copying, you're going to probably give them a strike.
Of course,
but a graphic artist that's doing their paintings, so they probably haven't thought about that. And when these engines learn stuff, the machine learning libraries, there's issues where they learn on people's content, and then when somebody asks for prompt engineering, it pulls some of that artist's content, and they're not getting compensated.
Exactly. Yep.
So that to me is the same kind of issue as clearing the sample. And I understand a lot of the tech bros, they want to act like that doesn't matter. They want to kind of outstrip copyright law. And I don't think that that's right. If this, and I understand the tech, they want it to grow, but you have to, they're making the money. If they're making the money from their algorithm, from the process, then they're demonetizing the artist.
Yeah.
In the name of progress, and I don't think that that's fair.
Yeah. And I think they kind of got away with it because, you know, and I love how you bring up sampling, because the same way that the industry wasn't, you know, it's never, we're going to create these laws because we know this technology is going to come out in 6 months to a year, or we're going to be proactive. You know, largely legislation is always reactive, right?
Yeah,
Because there's something that has happened, or there is something, you know, very rare is it. And I don't, that would be, ironically, that'd be a fun thing to chat GPT. Hey, chat, like, what's the most preeminent time when legislature was proactive?
yeah, it's never. It's always
um,
kind of backing
it's
into it. You know, you
always,
like copyright law has always been a thing. You know,
but I
and
think that's how they got around it, because, you know, and now they're having to deal with the attribution issue, right? So it's like, okay, well, how, first of all, what is and isn't fair, and then how does the attribution work, right? You know, how many works of art went into this output that Dali just gave this person, you know,
yeah,
and then
it's kind of like if you think about a sample, like if you think about bands like De La Soul and Public Enemy,
yeah.
they had multiples. Like they could have hundreds of samples in 3 minutes.
Oh yeah,
And
100%.
digital rights management eventually ended up clearing those.
Right. Yeah.
So I think in theory, like it sounds like, oh, it's too much to clear. It's like that's not really the truth. The technology is capable of
Mhm.
doing it. You maybe just don't want to do it.
100%. And so I think it's you know, it's gonna be interesting to see how they navigate that, is all I'm saying. But yeah, the attribution, the, you know, one of many issues, right? I think you said that you want to talk about the energy consumption thing too. That's a
Yeah,
good one.
yeah.
I remember when I learned, what is it? I think it was, is
I
it,
got some numbers I can give
yeah,
you.
give me the numbers, but it's
Yeah, like a
it's a
human
few
brain
hundred thousand
typically. Yeah, a human
gallons of
brain
water.
typically uses like 20 watts of power,
Hmm.
right? Maybe even low as 12 watts of power for most of your thinking, your computer, you know, that you do
Hmm.
in terms of what the human brain does, right? If you
Hmm.
look at like an AI model like ChatGPT 4, it
Hmm.
uses like an example training ChatGPT. Well, you know, that model is like 10 to 100 megawatts per hour of electricity,
Mhm.
could power like 100 homes for a day. Right,
Mhm.
and then if you look
Mhm.
at training ChatGPT-3 took about, like 1,287 megawatts per hour, which is about
Mhm.
120 average US homes.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so as you
Mhm.
start looking at the amount of power that it's taking,
Mhm.
then you
Mhm.
have to consider the CO2 impact and then the job loss impact. So if
Mhm.
you start to calculate the benefit, like this is something that, you know, environmentalists have always tried to point out.
Mhm.
If you have a chemical company like Dow Chemical and they create like a chemical, right? But it causes cancer.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
gets into the water supply and causes pollution.
Mhm.
That product was not priced with the pollution aspects, the damage it's creating.
Mhm. Mhm.
People need to start accurately pricing the impacts of their products and not just being very narrow. But you
Mm.
know, they don't want to do that. But so
Of course.
you have to make a calculations. Is it worthwhile to society to use all
Mm.
this water and all this energy
Yeah.
for certain types of tasks, or should they be used more prioritized to what task you're doing? Now,
Yeah.
people go, you're kind of, well, we have to ration stuff eventually because we only have so much clean air and clean water.
Sure. Yeah. I thought for me, the water consumption alone for me was one of the more eye-opening um eye-opening dilemmas when I was getting started and just learning about what
Yeah,
this thing
what it's
is.
doing.
Yeah, and then I don't think the average person, you know, knows that, but I don't, and maybe you have the numbers on it too, but I read the article and I reposted it, I think almost 2 years ago now, but just the the thousands and thousands of gallons that are needed daily just to cool the
The
servers.
cooling, yeah, the cooling
Right.
circuits. Like,
Just to cool the servers alone. And so, and then to your point, right? Are does the price factor that in?
and
If
do
you're
you
looking at,
recycle that water and make sure that it actually isn't polluted?
you're right. And then
So, and if you don't, then that's another consequence.
right. And then if you look at, I mean, open AI is a very interesting phenomenon, right? Because if you take a look at like their their losses, right? Are they in the green? Are they in the black? Are they in the red? And I think they've ran a net loss, I think, basically ever since launching ChatGPT. They're not making money off of this thing. And so the question is like, okay, well, then why is it here? And you have folks like Microsoft that have invested heavily into this company that's been running a net loss on its flagship product.
You're turning back on the 3 Mile Island nuclear reactor to power it to try to not have the CO2 impact.
Yeah.
But then they have a nuclear impact. Exactly. So then it's like, okay, you can go green and try to run it with solar or geothermal or wind, or like ocean current. You there's a lot of different ideas, but it's like really like fusion power would be the ultimate solution to power AI, because that would be like the best bang for the buck in terms of power.
Well, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be like a Gene Roddenberry idea. Like we get
right.
But like that's blue sky. Like dealing with it, like if you have Grok poisoning Nashville, poisoning an area with tons of like gas turbines.
Yes.
Like you have to start thinking about like what's the value of my prompt to figure out what how I can make my cat video have better SEO.
Exactly. But then you can use the prompts for real life changing stuff though, and that's why I try to get I try to at least get people to at least know what this thing is and at least play around with it, because this is where it's headed. This is where it's headed.
I mean the technology is very useful. I mean, as a business system analyst and developer, I can do things. I can use it to code things that are repetitive, right?
100%.
Use it to automate workflows, create templates, do things where I can come up with like with very detailed prompt engineering, get the things way faster than I could have done manually. I still have to trust and verify.
Of course.
Right? I still have to understand where my citations are coming from and stuff like that. So the problem I have with some people is like, it's better than Google search. Well, now Google search is using AI, but the idea was that before, like a search that wasn't using AI would give you stuff back that's like, well, that's very questionable. Right. And you can immediately see it's very questionable. AI with like hallucinations and like, sometimes it will give you something that's very convincing.
Yeah.
But you need to make sure you check it, because there are lawyers who have been burned by this. There are surgeons who have been burned by this. There are engineers who have been burned by it.
Yes.
So you still have to do some work.
100%. 100%.
So, I mean, it's a great tool. It's like, as a musician, I would kind of point out, I'm a, electronic musician. When the first Moogs were created in the 50s by Robert Moog, Dr. Robert Moog.
Yeah.
There were like purist musicians that said that's not a real instrument.
Yeah.
Right. But then we have Sun Ra and Herbie Hancock and all these jazz musicians that proved, and funk musicians, well, it is a real instrument.
Right? It is a real instrument. It sounds great.
Yeah.
I can't imagine music without synthesizers now.
Yeah, without like a Moog bass or something.
Yeah, 100%.
So the idea, or an ARP 2600 or 2500, and being able to do what you can do.
Yeah.
And so there's always these people that want to be pure, and it only can be acoustic. It only can be a book instead of reading like a physical book, instead of reading something off like an iPad. But I think there also is this idea of like, you don't want to get lazy.
Yeah, sure.
And you still want to have the human kind of vulnerability of like flow state. And also as an artist, it's your human emotional plane that gives you the impact of your work. A tool like a computer can replicate things, but it doesn't have that heart, doesn't have the vulnerability. It's not sentient. It hasn't had that pain.
There's no feeling. Yeah.
So it can give you something that's very convincing. But it, to me, is like, don't start to think that now we're going to have AI pop stars, AI movies, AI everything, and then no human ability is needed.
I got to read the article, but apparently Timbaland just like signed his first AI artist or something. Did you see that?
Yeah, I think we're going to go through a phase of these AI artists.
But it might be here to stay, because it's like, I feel like if you factor in the generative AI technology with like the Tupac or Michael Jackson hologram, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, because it's not just the AI technology, it's the intersection and the integration, of AI with all these other technologies, like you mentioned, like blockchain or like, hologram technology, AR technology, VR technology. That to me is the other aspect of it that's just amazing to me. If you look at AI standalone, it's already doing interesting things. But when you start to think, well,
Well, yeah,
AI plus
connecting with like
AI,
robotics. To me,
right?
like AI is necessary
Yeah,
to actually get to like an Android.
exactly.
To actually
It's
build an Android.
critical. Yeah.
Yeah, that to me is like the best case for it. Is when you're
Interesting.
building robots and and autonomous type of vehicles need that kind of capability. I'm kind of very suspicious of it in the arts
Sure.
because I look at it as more like a tool, like a synthesizer, but don't make it be 90% of the art.
Yeah.
I think when you go and take like if it's 20%, 30%, 40%, but if it becomes 80 to
Sure.
90% of a project,
Yeah.
it's somewhat suspect to me.
I love it though, because it's like then you get into the subjective aspects of things, because there's going to be people who are like just straight up AI artists, and there's going to be people who love them, and then there's going to be people who hate them. It's just like the way it is, and I love it.
Yeah, I just don't want to start planning like the hard work it takes to become, a master at your instrument,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because the thing there's a lost art even
hmm
today.
hmm
You have a lot of people who are DJs and producers, and they can't play a bass guitar, they can't play a Hammond B3, they can't play a piano,
Yeah.
they can play guitar. They
Yeah.
are a producer, they are not a musician.
Sure, yeah, but they're gonna and they'll realize though, it's like if they want to get to a certain place with their beat making, right, they're probably gonna need to learn how to play the keys, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, there's a certain point, but when you get certain level with AI, you could start to blur the line and people won't do the work. So I'm
Yeah.
scared of a generation that doesn't learn how to play piano,
Yeah,
doesn't learn
sure.
how to play a guitar and loses the value of it just because something is popular.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's good.
And that
That's the rub, this could you got a million views doesn't mean you're actually bringing anything great into the world.
but that brings us to, a lot of things, but I think the main piece there is like, what sort of relationship do we have with, the younger and future generations, and how are we communicating those values, right? Because ultimately they're the ones who are going to have to weigh whether or not they view AI the same way that we do, or if they want to be a full on, I'm 5 years from now, you're probably going to be able to create your whole AI band. Like, this is my AI bass player, this is my AI keys player, and this guy, he's upset on Mondays. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, but it's
they're going to
still
be
kind
able
of
to do
living off
that.
of what it's learned on.
But that's a we but we I wanted to focus on that, like, if we're afraid of the generation that doesn't need to or has like no interest in learning piano, right? Ironically, like, that puts the onus back on us, right? Because
Yeah.
now we need to make sure that we have real relationships with real young people, so that we have a shot at seeing if they carry on the same values that we do. But
But also, I think
ultimately,
it goes toward like attention span and the depth of your learning, right?
hmm,
So if you've got somebody that's a kid in the modern world, right?
hmm,
Instead of reading Moby Dick, they asked the AI to give them the top 10 points of view that they should get out of Moby Dick. There was
hmm,
something really important about reading
hmm.
all those words.
Sure,
And
sure.
when you stop doing that,
Yeah.
you start to lose perspective. You start to lose critical thinking. You
Mhm.
start to just doing things that are kind of get a job done, but what depth do you have?
But they might not wanna read Moby Dick, though. Do
I
you
know,
see what
but
I'm
you
saying?
still need to have a depth of being able to consume, whether it's Shakespeare or Moby Dick. There's certain things that kind of baseline in a canon of knowledge,
Mhm.
like Plato. Like you got to learn Socratic thinking. If you just
Maybe.
shortcut
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like, I hear what you're saying. Like, I gotta be devil's advocate, because it's like, for me, people will pay attention to the things that they wanna pay attention to, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like, if we think through grade school, right? There were some things that you learned in grade school that you took with you, but then there were some things that you learned like, could have skipped that. You know what I'm saying? And I think, with AI, at the very least, you have an engine that can do personalization at scale. You know what I'm saying? And so like I've worked with learning departments where they're starting to try and figure out, okay, well, how can we get the metadata from all the people who took this last iteration of the course, what they liked, what they disliked, to then create a more dialed in course that's going to give them what they want, but then the AI can provide that personalized learning experience, right? Like maybe you test out of module 3 because you already know it, or based on what your specific goals are, you don't even really need module 3. And so I think like, I'm not disagreeing with you,
But sometimes what you want and what you need, and going editing things out, right?
well, in right now, like
You're losing some perspective.
Sure, but the
Right.
education system right now, they're teaching to the test. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
well, I don't agree with teaching to the test.
exactly, but that's the system that we currently have. Like
That system is producing people who have a lack of critical thinking.
Exactly.
And
so
that to me is the important thing. And if you continue to use AI to perpetuate a lack of critical thinking.
But it could help us be more relevant and create lesson plans and create a curriculum that is more dialed into that individual person, and perhaps maybe that person will actually want to show up, right? If they're actually
give them to show up, but if they give them to show up and they don't have the depth of critical thinking capabilities. Like I'm in software design and we need people to think out the box. And we need people to have logical thinking that really does depend on asking hard questions and having perspectives that maybe you don't want to know.
Sure.
Right, is important. So if you only give people exactly what they want, they don't always get what they need.
Can you train someone to think outside the box?
You can give people a lot of different perspectives, and that can feel uncomfortable, and that can feel like you don't need to know that. And the thing is like this: if you're a musician, you have to challenge yourself to do the hard things.
Sure.
To get really good, you can't stay in a comfort zone. If you just give people their comfort zone, you won't get exceptional behavior. Right. And so if you just teach people to the test and they don't challenge things, they don't ask hard questions, they never raise their hand, they just they pass the like I went to a school, Bowdoin College, and we had blue book exams that weren't just multiple choice, had to show that I understood the concept of Camus or Sartre, or the concept of a theory, and put it in my own words and not just do with the multiple choice. That's why I can do what I do today. When you have people that don't have that level of skill, you can see it, you can feel it, you can know it.
Sure.
I think that things that make things too easy for people, you're not going to get a rocket scientist, you're not going to get a philosopher, you're not going to get a critical thinker that's out of the box. Society needs people who are more in tune with challenging their own vulnerabilities and challenging the preconceived mores. If you get a bunch of people with this yes people, that doesn't really help society.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm listening. Yeah, I'm picking up everything that you're putting down. Yeah.
So I think the danger in technologies that make things easier for people is that you get weaker. Right? You can see with our physical conditioning of a lot of people in this, people who don't have the fitness, then they don't have the mental fitness, and then they don't have like an emotional intelligence. So if you have people who don't have emotional intelligence, they don't have physical intelligence, they're nutritionally deficient. You make a weaker person. Science fiction writers talked about this, Isaac Asimov, Ben Bova. Many science fiction authors show that eventually humans, if they let the machines get too far ahead and don't actually challenge themselves, it becomes like a society of people who don't even know how to feed themselves. So, I love tech. I'm in tech. So I'm not somebody who says, oh, just read a book. But I think people have to know the morality of what they're doing. There has to be ethics in what you're doing. You have to look at the total cost of anything.
Well, and I think that's the challenge, right? Because there is no There is no universal moralistic ethical framework. There isn't one. And you're in tech, so you already know that's the most, or one of the most pressing challenges with AI in general, is the more capable these machines get, they're going to need to have or operate off of certain beliefs in order to carry out next level tasks. And then the question then becomes, okay, well, who gets to decide what this thing believes, what this thing doesn't believe, how and when it operates? And that's moral value alignment is like my favorite topic in AI. And most people don't want to talk about it. And I get it.
Yeah, I think
It's not sexy, but it's also the main thing to me.
It's the main thing because you kind of get to this like Gene Roddenberry world that was like kind of discussed in a lot of his science fiction. Was what happens if you don't do that, right? What happens if you let, like a HAL 9000 in 2001 get out of control, right? You don't give it constraints. And the thing is, we've got people like, I understand, I'm in tech. Tech bros are going around saying they want to have a free ride for 10 years. No state regulations. That's a dangerous thing to do.
For sure.
Because like, I'm sure you're living in that kind of, AI tower. It's kind of like the Oppenheimer thing. Like Oppenheimer got tunnel vision about trying to create a nuclear bomb. Then he had all that tech to do it. And then he saw like, oh, I didn't realize they were actually going to kill hundreds of thousands of people with it.
What did you think they were creating the atomic bomb for?
That's the problem.
Oppenheimer. Like, what did you think they were making it for?
Yeah, he got so into the tech of it. He didn't think about the moral consideration until after he'd done it, and then he couldn't put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah, and I run into the opposite problem. Like, I will try to get people to talk about the moral ethical thing, but then they'll be like, what can it, but how does it scale? How does it drive revenue? I'm like, yeah, it does it like this, but yeah,
revenue becomes its own kind of, you can have a very Calvinistic point of view. You can have a very destructive view. Like if you have capitalism, greed is good, right? The kind of Wall Street mantra.
Sure.
Then what happens when the taxpayer has to bail you out in 2008?
Right.
Greed is good until you suddenly need a taxpayer to come in and fix your problem, and we didn't sign up for that, right? So the problem I had is like AI gets into control of everything, and then like it makes bad decisions. And you let it make the bad decision because you connect it to the infrastructure, you connect it to the monetary system, you connect it to biological systems, and then it starts making decisions that, oh, that actually isn't optimum for human individuality. But then the AI can say, well, human individuality is illogical.
Exactly. So it's like human, and the thing that I love about it is it's like, when people express their frustrations or fears or cautions as it relates to AI, I'm like, okay, we recognize that those are human problems, right? The AI is gonna do what we tell it to do. I'm putting that in hard air quotes for people who are just
it's what it's been programmed to do, and what it's limited to the library of information you've given it, and that can be very like if you think about it, if you've got a bunch of tech bros that have an ideology of I'm gonna have the disruptor mindset. The disruptor mindset is that I'm gonna go into a government program like Social Security, I'm just gonna disrupt it. Right. But what about the reason it was created? Because there were people who were elderly that had no dignity and were dying in the ditch.
Yeah.
Right. If you go do what your disruptive thing, that works when you're in your startup. But when you do that to human beings, there ends up being wreckage.
Sure.
So when you have things that are just logical, profit. Well, sometimes like the fire department is not profitable. A social program like Social Security is not necessarily profitable. Medical care for a cancer patient is not profitable.
For the cancer patient.
Yeah. It's going to cost millions of dollars for one individual.
Yeah.
A system might say like, well, maybe I shouldn't do that. And that person would die and then I don't have to pay for that anymore. That's what the logic would do.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to start understanding if you don't train it and understanding the value of things that don't have anything to do with profit. Right. But if your whole motive is profit.
Yeah.
That I think you got you got a big problem coming down the pike.
I agree.
So, I mean, I think it's like people don't teach people about that. I mean, you can take philosophy class, but then people say, "Oh, I don't need to take that." Right. So if you get people in tech, they don't take history. So they don't learn the lessons of the 30s. Did they read about Stalin? Did they read about Hitler? Did they read about Mussolini? Did they read about the Roman Empire? Did they read about the excesses of certain government systems, monarchies, oligarchies? Do they really understand? No, all they want to care about is STEM. If you just do STEM and you don't do art history, and you don't do philosophy, and you train your systems without having any philosophy, without any art history, without any music or the arts, then what do you expect to get? Then the arts will become something that's not valued.
And then it gets to the question that I was asking before. It's like, how do you get somebody to care? How do you get somebody to care about Socratic thinking? How do you get somebody to care enough to actually read the book? You know what I'm saying?
You kind of got to train the models on things that are softer.
Right? I suppose, but I don't think it's like the teachers who say, like, teaching starts at home, and so you have like parents who rely on teachers to basically raise their kids to be, pinnacles of society, right? Moral, ethical pinnacles of society, good people, quote unquote.
Yeah, somebody's idea of being good, that you could have somebody that's in the Klan.
Right.
And they think that this is good.
And that to me is the entire point, though. That to me is the entire point. There is no, this gets into belief systems, right? But just looking, there is no, Lord forgive me, but there is no like one like good, right?
Yeah, everybody's perspective of good is based on their cultural
is different, and
their cultural mores.
So that to me is the fundamental problem, because if we agreed on what was good, then in theory the problem that we have with AI is purely technological. We just need to figure out how to code this thing, but we already agree on what is good, healthy, and valuable. We agree on that 100%. We just need to figure out the zeros and ones. The problem that we have, though, is we are focusing more on figuring out the zeros and ones than we are figuring out, well, what is or isn't good, healthy, and valuable.
That's like the philosophy argument. And like, if you don't teach the concept of philosophy, the fact, like you said, they like perspective of what's good and what's bad, what's evil and what's not evil, right?
Yep.
And if you if you have a mindset, the only thing that's important is profit.
Yep.
Right. And then the only thing that's good is efficiency.
Yep.
Like I said, the fire department's not efficient.
Yep.
Right. FEMA is probably not efficient.
Yep.
But if there's a hurricane or earthquake, you're gonna wish you had it.
Exactly.
Right? So the problem is, like, if you only, and you got mindsets that will say, well, I don't need to worry about it till it happens. So if you get the big San Francisco quake or the caldera in Yellowstone goes off, boy, you got a mindset of the blue sky mindset. Says, I don't need to fund disaster because that's not profitable. Well, what happens when it happens?
Yeah.
Right. Then you have no planning, no 100. Critical thinking. You got a whole generation of people that are looking at very short-term gain without linking long-term strategic thinking.
Yeah.
So that's a problem again that goes toward, if you've read all of Moby Dick, the idea, like if you read a 300,000 word book, and you actually do it, your neural pathways pick up things. You pick up information. You start to understand different paths, different ways of being.
Sure.
If you limit what you actually learn to just get the thing done, to get the A.
Yep.
to get the qualification.
Mm-hmm.
You get people that are very much kind of just cogs in a machine.
Well, and we're going to have to, and this is why I love we are going to, because AI is already, whether we realize it or not, it's already holding up a really big mirror in front of us as a species, right? And so, no matter how you slice it, the problems always come back to, they're always back on humans, because we're the ones who created the systems and we're the ones who created the values, right? Quote unquote. And so it's interesting because, we aren't facing a technological problem. The technology isn't the problem. The human heart is the problem.
It's the same rub.
Yep.
It's the same things. Like, how did we get to World War I? How did we get to World War II? Like all this technology, all this critical thinking. Like, you had the age of enlightenment, and you still had a war.
Yeah. Right.
You had like, so how did you get to that? How do you get with all this this capability, and then you still like bomb Berlin into the ground?
Exactly.
You had Hiroshima, you had London burning, you had Rwanda. It's like human beings have a core problem.
Yeah.
It does not seem to get solved. Continues.
Yep.
And then if you bring a technology, it's just a mirror on, like you said. And so if you think it's a panacea, like your soulmate is going to solve all your problems, anybody who goes to a therapist knows that if you don't love yourself,
can't love anybody else.
It's going to fail.
Yep.
So if humanity doesn't love itself and doesn't understand the lessons of the past and doesn't learn from the lessons and keeps on repeating the same bad loops, it's like the person that goes to the therapist. And the AI is just on top of it, and your robots are on top of it, your automation's on top of that.
Yeah.
I
agree.
That's the core problem.
100%. I agree with you 100,000,000%. Actually, I wish more people would talk about this topic alone. Be like, this AI, I'm worried about. Worry less about the robot takeover and worry more about the fact that we don't agree on anything, but there's a very small percentage of the population that is going to create technology based on what they think is good and what they think is bad. And your values and ethics may or may not agree with theirs, but there's going to be advanced technology that agrees with them.
Yeah. If you think about it, like, let's say, to put it like a science fiction point of view.
Yeah.
If your AI mindset and ecosystem is built on a concept of eugenics.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's not going to be very positive. They'll think it's positive.
Exactly.
They think so. You have to understand, and ask the hard question: is this thing being built with a eugenics point of view?
Well, and so this is where you start to ask those questions, right? So if I'd tell somebody, hey, there's a company over here, there's a person over here, and a really rich guy went up to this person because this person had a really cool widget or a really cool idea. And so the really rich person's like, I want to invest in that. But ever since that person has invested in this person's idea, they haven't made any money on it for years and years and years. And yet the rich person still continues to give them money. The question is like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, right, unless money isn't the motive.
Yeah. Well,
because if money isn't the motive, then, because that's what's happening with OpenAI, right? I mean, they haven't profited on ChatGPT. It's not even close. There are hundreds of millions of dollars being lost every single day, and yet it's continuing to be developed and it's continuing to be invested into. And so the question, to your point, becomes why? Because if I was in tech sales and I failed, quote unquote, that miserably, like from a financial standpoint, month over month, year over year, I would have gotten pipped and fired a long time ago.
It's almost like it's an investment that's being done, right? And they're losing money on the investment, but the people who benefit from the tech, right? If you take that tech and then you eliminate like 1,000 workers or 10,000 workers from your business, you might be profitable. So your individual business might start making money.
But it won't make money for long because I mean, if a few businesses do that, you destabilize the economy. Your consumers don't have buying power anymore.
Or that's the problem, that they don't seem to have had the holistic thinking of the bubble. You get this talk that I'm going to eliminate all these positions.
Oh yeah.
Right. And then I'm like, okay, well, where's the Henry Ford concept of I need to pay a wage so they can buy the car? Right. Henry Ford kind of had this idea, like, if my worker can't buy the car, then that's probably not going to work.
If that worker can't afford the car, then why do you exist?
Yeah. So, but these guys are again going to get to a point where the workers are all going to be home.
Yep.
And they're not making any income. And the money's all tilted toward during the golden age or the gilded age. And they don't seem to have. This is the problem with these guys. Is like, have you not read about the gilded age?
Right.
Did you not understand the economic situation that led up to 1929? Did you not look at what happened when the few people had all the money and the masses didn't? And did you not notice that when it shifted during FDR and Johnson, where you allowed the middle class to have earning power, and have education, the economy the GDP went through the roof. But if you go back to the Gilded Age, the GDP was in the tank, right? So, like, if somehow they have this pie in the sky notion, they're going to give everybody some kind of living wage.
Right, the universal basic income.
When is it that a billionaire ever came up with an idea like that?
Right.
I've never heard of a billionaire ever really doing that. That money would go to Mars.
I always thought to myself, right. I was like, man, when they start printing out and giving out free money, that's when you really need to be concerned.
It doesn't seem believable based on previous behavior.
100%.
So this idea that they float, and I've run into some tech bros. I had a conversation. They had this kind of pie in the sky that you'll be able to be, sitting at home and do all your like lovely dreaming and have everything like the Jetsons or something. And like it's like, boy, it's probably got more look like El Salvador or Nicaragua or somewhere in Africa.
Lord help.
You're like, you're living in like very subsistence, living in your car.
Yeah.
Not having anything.
Yeah.
So it's like where did you think? And you're going to be in these walled off city states that are for the Gilded Age people, and everybody else will be in the slums. Right. So if you go to some countries, like that structure is like that. Like you have like go to India, you can have these slums right near the mansions.
Yeah.
And like is that what you think is? I think that is more likely what you will see.
Oh no, I mean the things are trending in that direction.
So the idea that they throw out, and people are like, "Oh yeah, it's going to be like this futuristic thing." It's like, really?
Yeah, because the futuristic thing doesn't factor in the. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you still hear me?
Yeah,
I was gonna say the future hasn't reconciled the human heart issue and the fact that all of the inefficient, oppressive systems that we currently have are the result of that heart. And that heart is currently the one that is driving the development of this technology, which is why I tell people it's like my goal. I'm trying to at least get as many people using and familiar with the technology in its current state as possible. Because my logic is that if we can get more people involved, perhaps there's a way to
sit at the table.
Yes, perhaps there's a way to ensure that the technology that's developed at least is representative of real people. But even I know that that's very idealistic thinking, but at the same time, it's like you live in a day where it's like you have to be idealistic. I mean, look around you.
I think what you have to also is have kind of an entrepreneur heart.
Yeah.
Where, with a 3D printer and an idea.
Yep.
You can actually become an entrepreneur. Like you could be like a podcaster like me. You could be somebody who's there's a lot of people ever since COVID that have decided, like, I don't want to work 9 to 5. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be a micro level entrepreneur. So they've gone into themselves and they've used technology like StreamYards, all the tech that we have today. And people are, TikTok entrepreneurs, Etsy entrepreneurs, 3D printer entrepreneurs. You could actually take an idea that would have took 50 people
Exactly.
and actually do something. And now not everybody's going to do that, because there's a lot of people who are kind of built. Well, I was built to actually sit in the cube.
Yep.
Right. I was built to actually be on the assembly line.
It's a
Right.
huge mindset shift.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really
And
is.
it's like how many people are really going to go to like the age of enlightenment and be sitting there like the Victorian poets,
And how do you get
writing
people
these like these big like looking glass self concepts?
and
Not
how do
everybody's
you
going to do
get
that.
people to actually sign up for wholeheartedly that sort of a mindset and philosophy shift? Really? Yeah, 100%. Like I run in that problem all the time. It's like, how do you get people to care? It's like, that it's a pressing issue. How do you get people to care enough to do something about it? And I think that's kind of been one of the issues that humans have had with each other and with ourselves forever. It's like, how do I actually get somebody to care enough?
Well, people are always going back, and like I'm looking to like get these guys that want to reindustrialize the U.S. Even if you reindustrialize the U.S., a factory in 1972 is not a factory in 2025.
Right.
In 2025, a factory requires people who know how to use CNC, to understand robotics, and that factory has less manual tasks in it no matter what.
Exactly.
Right? So that factory is not going to have the need for 1,000 workers. It might only have 10, 20, maybe 100. Most likely it won't even have 100. So the idea that you could reindustrialize is not using critical thinking.
Right.
See, the problem is people don't really go and check it out. Like, go and look at it, right? Go research what a modern factory, what it's being done. Look at what the factories do in China. Look at how they actually have a situation where they have a lot of labor and they have a lot of people. And then they have a lot of discipline and Eastern mindset where they can get people to do a task repetitively that's almost robotic. And they'll do it at a high level of quality that a Western worker won't.
Well, but China is also basically living in a communist dictatorship.
Yeah.
Do
you really want to be the person putting that screw in the phone?
Exactly. Right. It's like
what you really think, and you're not going to
get paid. All of our jobs, but like, which jobs are they taking? Do you really want to go pick those oranges?
Is that the job you want? Do you want to go back and pick cotton?
Right. Exactly.
Is that really what you want to do? You want to be picking the lettuce?
Right.
It's more likely that an industrial prison is actually going to send the worker to pick the lettuce.
Yeah.
That you're going to get caught up in an industrial private prison and you'll be back on the farm.
Yes.
Right. That's highly likely. And then they'll be there with the robots.
Yep.
Right? You'll be there with the drones. And that's what you'll be doing rather than doing your free thought.
Exactly.
So like it's more dystopian, and people, you shouldn't think that way. It's like, well, I look at what's going on right now. You got people in prison systems working in Wendy's and McDonald's.
I don't
in the third shift.
I love how much of a realist you are, because you're absolutely right. The mindset and the vocabulary and the ideas that are coming out of people's, beings is very blue sky, and whenever you mention like, well, maybe we should focus on this glaring problem, people get really uncomfortable. And it's so difficult because like it's like I want to have the difficult conversation. I love that I can have the conversation with people like you, but it's rare that you'll find folks who are like, hey, I want to know about how bad it is from a, like, really, not like the doom and gloom, but how bad is this really?
But look at me. I'm just pointing out like real world situation. We
Well,
have
right. And
industrial prisons now.
And I was going to say, like, all you're doing is you are basing what's going to happen in the future based off of what has happened in the past and what's already happening right now. Yeah. And I don't think that that's illogical, but you will have people, but you will have people who will look at folks like us and then they'll be like, oh, well, you're a naysayer or you're a skeptic, or, well, I'm not a skeptic. Like I'm
using the tech.
I'm using it. Right. I'm on the AI podcast right now. Like
that's the problem with these guys is like, the problem I have is just like I talked earlier. If you're at a chemical company, you build a pesticide, you create a pesticide, and it actually is a carcinogen. But you profit motives if you're going to sell it to the farmers and do it, and then you'll try to get out of the legislation that keeps you from that makes you have to pay the cost of what your true product cost was. That's the problem I have. Is it's the same problem with the use of the CO2 aspects of AI, the water usage, and the power usage.
For sure.
You are not showing people the true cost of your product.
Exactly. The true cost or the true ramifications, you
Yeah.
know, which are less like we're less likely to know those like specifically. Like it's really, you know, you can't really forecast the impact of AI, but to your point, like you can look at, for example, capitalism is always going to be buy low, sell high, doesn't matter. And as soon as the technology, like the rhetoric in the big tech or big AI circles and communities that I've been able to listen to, is very much that, oh, AI is going to, like, there's augmentation and then there's automation. And they'll say that, oh, well, the AI is going to augment, but it's not going to automate. Like it'll help you do, a few things, but it's not going to replace humans 100%. And I'm over here sitting like, how dare you lie to people like that?
They're already doing it. I mean, I already see.
Nature says as soon as this thing can replace this person, it will.
Yeah, well, I mean, the way capitalism is like as soon as they can get rid of that programmer,
right,
that's doing the kind of cut and paste code,
right,
we're already getting rid of them, right?
100.
That's already happening, right? If thing can figure out the Python and run the code, do the .NET, it's doing it, right?
Which is the ironic thing to me, because it's like, this is why, like, you know, I do the community, and it's like, hey, like let's get your dream off the ground with this technology, because the job, the 9 to 5 as we know it, we already know where that's trending.
Yeah, right. I mean, the idea of doing repetitive tasks, whether you're a white collar repetitive, those repetitive tasks can be
well, and then also those good wages, right? A good wage that's above 6 figures coming from a company. Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I work with startups, you know, and I work like as a consultant, but yeah, I've been able to find, you know, in that range because I'm in that space.
Right.
But the thing is like if you're coming out with like $500,000 of college debt,
right,
$400,000 of college debt, what companies are going to pay you enough money to pay that 500,000?
Exactly.
Buy a car.
Yep.
Buy a house.
Yep.
Pay for healthcare. Pay for retirement.
Yep.
Look at what the actual wage is.
Right.
And look at what your costs are.
Yep.
And what I see the AI doing is giving you less of a salary and your costs are still high. So tell me where my free money is coming from, you techno gurus.
Right. Exactly.
I don't see you actually giving me a living wage.
Yep.
I don't see that now.
Yep.
You know, in my situation in tech, back in, you know, I'll give an example. Back in the 80s, in the 90s, my health insurance cost were maybe $200-300 a week. Now my health insurance cost for a family are like $2,600 a week.
Yeah.
That's a large part of my percentage of my salary.
Oh, 100%.
Being transferred to me, and I'm getting less income. With all this tech, they're finding a way for me to pay more, and giving me less actual income.
Yeah.
That's the trend I see.
Yep.
And yet they're telling me they're going to give people, and that's the trend across multiple industries. So tell me, I see the truth, and you tell me some pie in the sky. Like really?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I would disagree with you if I was ignorant or nefarious, of which I am neither.
Yeah, I mean, people got to just start asking, like, their politicians, like, should we give AI 10 years of no regulations?
Well, and you already know, I mean, you know, Trump with Stargate, I mean, there's already those multiple billions of dollars worth of, and that's, I mean, you know, that, but they're trying to compete with China, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so, yeah, so
well, compete, like, that's interesting. Compete with China, or are you actually trying to keep technology from coming?
Right.
Like if you have an open market, an open source, you take innovation from anywhere.
Yeah, sure.
You're actually saying you can't get it from there. So is that really, like, anything that you're doing erased with tech? Would you go and say, I can't get it from the East?
Right.
I can only get it from here?
Exactly.
Logically, philosophically, this is where people aren't doing the critical thinking. Does that logically make sense?
But people aren't logical. As much
No.
as I wish that humans were logical creatures, we are not.
That's like 0 or 1. Does that make sense? You know, is it on or off?
Yeah.
Right. So they tell you one thing, but people don't really think about it. They don't.
But
think
what if? Oh, I don't know.
if an AI model here can do better reasoning, but you don't want it because it didn't come from America, or it didn't come from London, or it didn't come from Canada.
Yeah.
If it's still cutting edge, why would you not use it in a capitalist system? If I can do something at a better price, if I can do it at a lower cost, if I can be more efficient, that's what's supposed to run.
Exactly.
So you're telling me
we
one
play
thing
by
and
our own
doing something
rules
else.
until we play by our own rules until they inconvenience us, and then we rewrite them, right?
Yeah, you rewrite the rules. I mean, it happens all the time, but people don't pay attention to the chessboard. It's like,
Exactly.
are we playing checkers and they're playing chess?
Oh no, they're playing chess, and we're playing with the little ball in the cup thing that you get at the 7-Eleven.
Yeah, but nobody's actually thinking it out. It's like really start to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
You know, when you see that, like all the Uber drivers, they're not going to be Uber drivers. They're not going to be DoorDash drivers, right? They're not going
to. If the self-driving cars continue to get better and better, which they will.
Yeah, I mean,
and I think it's just very interesting because the AI ironically is having us, if we really think about it, you know, reckon with our humanity, you know, in a way that no other technology would have been able to, you know. So there's people like you and me who are going to ask the questions. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people are not going to ask the questions. They're just going to go along with it, whether out of fear or somehow genuine disinterest. I think it's usually fear-based, but
people got to understand, like, labor is being pushed to be lower cost. And the people who will get the benefit are the tech gurus and the entrepreneurs and the thinkers. So in the information age of, you know, technology automation age, if you don't use your head, you're going to be forced to use your back, you know, hard labor.
Yeah.
In one way or the other.
Yep.
And then that is very limiting based on human capability. You can only do so much physical labor for only so long in your life before your body doesn't support it.
Yep.
So, like, people better think it out.
We could pray.
Yeah, I love tech and I use it, and I'm on the curve of it where I'm using it and I'm in it, and I'm bringing up as an artist. I opted out of the SoundCloud.
Sure.
I didn't want it using my stuff because I actually understand what it means.
Of course.
But if people don't, like, you need to actually, like, do some research, go on and read about it.
Oh yeah.
Read about it from multiple points of view. Don't just if you see something too blue sky, be a little bit skeptical about it. Like, not that it's not good, not that I don't use it, but it's like you can't be extreme. It's like some people, I'm never going to use this, or I can't. You do that. It's like absolutes don't work.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's just like, oh, how much supposed to do?
Yeah, man.
But it's cool to have a conversation like this because people are so into their corners. And the thing I was taught at Bowdoin was, you know, like, yeah, let's have a debate. Let's have an honest debate. Let me hear your point of view. But, you know, I want to hear some evidence.
Sure.
I want you to point out your view and give me some facts.
Yeah.
Right? Give me some metrics. Show me logically, or show me why you have the passion for something. Explain it to me. Tell me the story.
Yeah.
Right? But if you can't explain it and you're just quoting something without understanding what it means because it's a shiny little thing that sounds good to you, that's the way you don't want to be there.
I can respect that 100%. Yeah, no, I tell people, the only reason I really got into this thing was because I realized that by the time my daughter is my age, this world's going to be unrecognizable because of this robot, because of this thing right here. And I tell people, it's like, I am not maybe I could be considered a tech insider now, but I am definitely not. I'm not some big Silicon Valley guru, or anything like that. I am literally a dude with a wife and kids who sees this world changing in a way that I didn't even know was going to happen in my lifetime.
Yeah, it's like everybody had to kind of figure out, like, in the space age happened,
Yeah,
and realize
exactly.
that, the generation that said, yeah, home computer is actually something you could get into. Like I was the first generation that had Atari 2600,
Yeah.
first generation that had like a Texas Instrument PC,
hmm
get a good first cell phones. Um, and the tech was just coming along, coming along,
hmm
coming along. And it's stuff like my mom was like, she would not get a cell phone for like
Right.
a decade. She's like,
Mm.
I don't want it. And then eventually, all of
Now
us,
everybody got one.
all of our children, like we went and got her one because like we, it's like now she's on it, but it's like
Yeah.
eventually you have to, like, the naysayer comes in, it's like, hey, I guess I better get on a train.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
But I want to thank you for being here. It's always great. We always, the time flies by when we're having fun. But
Absolutely.
we have your website, elroywaters.com. Let people know that's fully clickable. If people click on that, what do they find there?
Yeah. So they'll just find out a little bit more about me. My philosophy of the book is going to be up there. So if you're, ironically, if you're struggling to get a job and you want to level up quickly with AI skills, that book is going to be a very good help there. If you're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur who wants to get into using AI to automate aspects of your business or to launch a new business, I have a community, community.watersinstitute.ai. To check that out. And yeah, thank you. Yeah.
That's awesome. Because like that's how you can level up. Like I said, you can kind of ramp up as a micro entrepreneur. You can
Mhm.
get your certifications.
If
And
people aren't leveling up that way, I don't know how they're expecting to pay for retirement, college education, anything. I don't know how people are doing it without it, but let me know if you got the answer other than entrepreneurship.
yeah, that's the only way.
Yeah.
That's the creative spark. Everybody I know, I start. If you're a songwriter, you're an entrepreneur. But then eventually you realize, like, well, I got to pay for my mode.
Yep.
I got to pay for my bass. So then
hmm
you have to have a good day job.
Yes.
Well, the IT job with certifications in AI, that's a good way to pay for your instrument and pay for your band. So like
100%.
instead of being a mover, starving
Mhm.
artist mover, you can actually be a more, uh, you know, uh, somebody who's actually going to have some comfort. You don't have to be starving.
100%. 100%.
Thank you again for being on the show and have a great weekend.
Awesome. Thanks. Take care.